And we are, I think, moving along here. Let me check the volume level, just a moment, everybody. Yep, I have volume, all right.
27, 18 to 30, or 18 and on, I guess.
So it appears that we are working online and the volume level is good. So welcome to Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. Glad you're here with us here in the classroom itself and those of you online. And glad you could be with us. Just a couple moments, I gotta jot a few things on the board and then we'll start up, okay? So just bear with us just a moment.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Just watch your conversation.
I can't ride my motorcycle.
All right.
My
So what do I
wife-
got right here real quick here?
I had a little tiny heart attack on Monday,
Oh,
and they put a stent up in,
oh,
and so that's why I'm forbidden to ride my motorcycle by my life until I get clearance from the doctor.
Gets your heart rate up a little too much riding a
No.
motorcycle? No, not at all?
It's just enjoyable. The heart rate can go high, I don't care.
oh,
But spent 3 days in the hospital,
oh, did you?
Monday
Oh.
afternoon to Wednesday afternoon, and then they kicked me out, told me to go home.
Oh, nice of them to just say go home. Wow.
No,
Well, I'm glad
they
you're
were,
here.
the nurses and the doctors and the staff up there, even the ER room was,
Yeah.
God, I can't say enough about
You go
it.
to Salmon Creek?
Yeah.
Salmon Creek, yeah, they're really nice.
Yeah.
That's probably the
I'd
one to go
avoid,
to.
I'd avoid the ER department at Peace Health.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
Salmon Health is really good
Yeah.
hospital.
My only problem is my Medicare is Regents Advantage, and Regents and Legacy are having a little spat right now about payments. How, we want more, you need to pay more.
Yeah, I want to know who you're paying for.
Yeah, so that April 1st is when that ends. They'll be treating Legacy as, out of, network. So they won't pay as much.
Oh, yeah.
OHSU is really good too. When I was getting my treatment, I thought they wanted to marry me. They were so nice. I mean, they were just,
Bend over backwards.
yeah, they were doing all of this. Mr. White, are you comfortable coming in there and pat me? I just couldn't believe it. Just
And this is OHS?
OHSU,
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
I just,
Yeah, OHU's got a heck of a
Yeah.
hospital up there.
they
Yeah, it's,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to hire my mom to do research, work in the
Really?
research department. Yeah, she drove up there for the interview, couldn't find a parking space, so she said,
Oh.
"Heck with this,
Yeah,
if
too
I
much.
can't have a parking spot, I'm not working there."
It's still a mess up there with the parking. They haven't addressed that. They gotta put
Yeah,
a
but
parking garage.
once you become a staff in the research department, she'd have had her own parking spot.
Wow.
It'd have been reserved.
And isn't there a big complex up there? The
Yeah.
VA is up there and,
Yeah, stupidest place in the world to put a VA hospital,
Yep.
put any hospital.
Yeah.
There's an earthquake zone that runs up through there.
oh, you should not go there anymore, David.
Oh, now you're telling me.
Walk through the hospital and you can see big rubber strips, but yay wide, all the way up the wall of ceiling on the other side.
Take the little tram up there. Do you ever do the tram up
Oh,
there?
there you go.
Oh, the tram's
Just a
great.
moment.
Where's the rubber strips at up
They're
there?
up through the whole building, so if
Of
there's
what?
the VA hospital up there.
Oh, I've never been there, I didn't know.
I didn't
Oh,
know.
wow.
I gotta pay attention to that next time I
Just
go.
go up there and look, and ask them what these big rubber things are. They wanted to put the hospital right across the street from Clark College and south of the old VA hospital, because that was all owned in there, and it was politics that got it put over there.
Sure.
Oh, wow.
But it'd have been better to put it there.
Mm-hmm. You get that one little dinky road, that little windy road that goes, it's really steep. Yeah, it's kind of a crazy setup.
Well, the only reason I was up there was on the bus, cause everybody's talking about it, and I'd gone up there on the bus.
The gondola ride would be nice to take. just
Oh,
in
it's
case
the
it
gondola's
broke.
cool.
Oh, I rode the gondola too, yeah.
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 I was gonna ride the gondola when I was up in Albuquerque, but there was too much wind and they
Oh,
had it
that's
shut
a
down.
really good
That's a
one.
great one, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, you never get my wife up in those.
I won't get my kids up in those either.
All right, so we're ready to start here. Again, welcome to Grace Baptist Church, the Adult One Bible Study. And we're going to be in Genesis chapter 27 today, so get your Bibles out in chapter 27 of Genesis. And if you have a study book, we are in session number 3. Trace, there we go. And starts on page 28. So if you're following along with that, you can do that as well. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll jump right into this good study. Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the sunshine we have for it. I just pray that you be with those that are on their way here. Keep them safe, Lord. Be with those that are online viewing us as well. And be with those that we know that are sick. Lord, I just pray that you heal them. Lord, be with those family members that we care so much about that maybe are lost, and give us opportunities to witness to them as well. Thank you again for all you've done for us. In your Son's precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And so, how's everybody's week been? Good, I hope?
It's been fine.
Good. You ready for the nice weather? Because it's coming, it's here. Can't stop it. But it's going to be going away at the end of the week. Unfortunately, rain will be back on the agenda for, I think, Thursday. Something like that. But
We'll deal with it.
you know, I heard a discussion back and forth about weather and all of this, but you know, I kind of like spring the best. Fall's right behind it, and then summer I'm not really crazy about, because sometimes it gets too hot. Anytime it goes over 90, no thank you. And it does that out here. Actually, I'm not really enjoying anything over 85, but you know, I'll grant it up to 90. And I do have air conditioning now. This house that we're in has air conditioning, which is, ooh, I'm so spoiled.
It is nice.
It gets over 100, I start thinking about getting into cutoffs.
It's over 100. I'm looking for some relief. Maybe the beach where it's colder or something.
Go turn on the hose.
Yeah,
Norm,
I can run to the
and
sprinkler, right?
Underneath it.
I can run to the sprinkler. Anyway,
Grab my hot tea and sit out in the back.
we are in Genesis still, and we're in chapter 27. And the title of today's study is A Deceiver. Like I said, chapter 27. We're going to be looking at these 3 points. Trap set, verses 18 through 20. Deception carried out, 21 through 27. Blessing granted. I like that part, right? Don't we all like that part?
Yeah.
And that's 28 through 30. And the main idea of our study today is that God accomplishes his purposes, even though through flawed families and people. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because we're talking about a man named Jacob. Jacob and his brother Esau, and the interaction between these 2 brothers. So, let me see. Well, I should point out that we have a poster of the patriarchs, and it's over here. And we're going to be dealing with Isaac, the last parts of Isaac's life, going into Jacob. So that's where we are in that thing. And also, we have another one over here, key moments in Jacob's life, which is really applies to today. And when he was born, Jacob was grabbing onto Esau's heel. His brother was the firstborn of the 2 twins. And Jacob was second. Jacob used deception to gain the birthright and the blessing that would normally fall, not always, by the way, normally fall to the firstborn, which was Esau. But he uses deception to gain the birthright and blessing. So we'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. So, question, have you ever heard the term fake news before?
Yeah.
Maybe lots of times, right? People like to say that whenever something comes up that maybe it smells a little fishy, or maybe it doesn't go along with their preconceived ideas too. I've seen that both ways. Anyway, before I get into that, to redeem, I forgot about my verses. Who would like to read today for us? Any volunteers? I have a real long one. I got a fairly short one. What do you want? That one? You going for the long one? Okay. Oh, you want that one? Okay, sorry, don't do that one. You want this one? Sure. Would you like this one? Hey, perfect! All right. We got the verses disseminated. It's out there now. So there's an interesting part that I was going to look at. Where was that? Not there. Oh, it's in my Bible commentary.
Fake news.
What's that? Yeah, I was talking about the fake news a little bit here. Fake news is false or misleading information presented as news. This is really true, you know, and we've all heard that before. We're not going to get into the politics or anything like that right now because I don't want to be shadow banned by these people. But anyway, sometimes fake news goes viral and is quickly considered truth after a period. If you read it in the newspaper, it used to be, you know, it must be true. Now it's if you saw it on the internet, it must be true. No. No. But anyway, but when we can't verify the accuracy of a given piece of information, distinguishing the truth, is that easy then? it can be sometimes tricky, isn't it?
If you're not used to their truth,
Mm-hmm.
you can be easily deceived.
You can be, yeah. So in my Bible commentary, there's a little introduction here that I'm going to read first. It says, in biographies, authors sometimes ignore or cover up character flaws that they may have, if it's an autobiography, or somebody who maybe is favorable to the person who's doing a biography for them. They may not talk about those things. Flaws or mistakes don't seem to appear all the time. In contrast, the writers of the divinely inspired scripture present humans with all their foibles, warts and all, sometimes it says, right? We see them as they are, and that's kind of enlightening, right? These character portraits teach us that God can work through all kinds of us, people, right? All kinds of people. That's good to know, as long as we are willing to submit to his discipline. And Jacob is a really good illustration from the pages of the Old Testament, by the way. His very name means deceiver or supplanter. That's an old-fashioned word, meaning somebody who's giving out false things about themselves.
Is this Jacob?
Jacob. Yeah, the name Jacob means that. And for many years, he lived up to his name. Yet God accomplished his purposes through Jacob, even though he was that way, because God was going to use this person for his own will. You know, and we see that all the time. There's a good example of that is when the Israelites were in bondage. Remember, they were taken away by Nebuchadnezzar into Babylon, right? That's going to be it for them. They're done, right? Another king arose, and God used that man, Cyrus, king of the Persians, Medes and the Persians, and Israel was able to come back just like the prophet said. Go figure.
Wow.
But you never would have thought that. But it happened. It happened. Anyway. So as we reflect on the truth of this lesson, consider your own flaws and how God has used you despite your shortcomings. And I can see that in my life as well. And we need to spend time praying for ourselves and for others also, asking God to help us to see ourselves honestly and to let him change us from the inside out. So anyway, we have an introduction paragraph here, and I think I might have included. Yes, I did. So if you can see it on the first page of the lesson, but you can also see it in my handouts. Handout number 1, page 1, and the intro paragraph is right in the middle there. So let's go ahead and read that one there. There's a story about a first mate of a ship who despised his captain. In other words, he hated him. In the ship's log, he wrote one day, "The captain was sober today," while he was on the bridge.
Wow.
Well, that's good to hear, I guess. The truth of the matter was, though, the captain was always sober when he was on the bridge. The first mate's written words may have been truthful. Nevertheless, when he communicated, was kind of misleading and deceitful because it kind of led people to believe that he's not always sober on the bridge, but this time he's sober on the bridge. You know, that's what the deceit was in that kind of a way you'd look at that, right? Deceitfulness is an egregious sin. It's a bad sin. And will always come up with consequences. Still, God is able to accomplish his purposes through flawed and even deceitful people. Question: how should knowing that God is able to accomplish his purpose through flawed people impact us? Hey, come on in. Good to see you.
Thank you. Sorry.
So, no, you're fine. Have a seat. We got some handouts there for you as well, and wherever you want to sit.
Okay.
And we're in Genesis chapter 27 today. 27. We just started, so you haven't missed much, so you're doing fine. So anyway, talking about about deceit here, deceitfulness. How should knowing that God is able to accomplish his purposes through flawed people, how does that impact us? That's a question for us to consider. Does it scare us? Does it help us? Does it enlighten us? Does it maybe give us hope? What do you think? Any of those things?
Gives you hope. It
Does give us hope,
gives
doesn't
you
it?
Hope, yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
It's when you want to do
Uh-huh.
right, good, and things that are pleasing,
Uh-huh.
and you don't feel adequate, and you see God is using other people that are in that category, rather worse than you.
Uh-huh.
You said, "There's hope for me."
Yeah, that does sort of thing. Well, I know my flaws. Well, sometimes we even fool ourselves, don't we? But when I see the fact that God can use somebody like a Jacob, even though what he did was a horrible thing, we can see how it worked out for God's own will, right? Anyway, so it sort of gives us an idea here. And right now I'm just looking at one of the handouts right now. That you have a copy of them there as well. That just gives you an idea where we're at here. Don't worry about following along with that part. But so on that intro paragraph, it helps us, right? So let's just jump into some of the context here. And there is in the lesson book, says understand the context. And I'm not going to read every word here. This is on page 29. But I just want to talk a little bit about this because it gives us some background here. A lot of times people will tend to skip over Isaac because Jacob is kind of the big one, Jacob or Abraham, and they kind of skip over Isaac. We shouldn't do that. Isaac is important too. The account of Isaac demonstrates God's faithfulness to fulfill what he says he's going to fulfill through Abraham and his offspring, right? Because Isaac's part of that chain. Second is, even though Isaac at times displayed weaknesses in his character, yes, he did, weaknesses in his character, we see that later on he's thought to be a godly man. Isaac was unusual in his day because he had only one wife. And a lot of those people, those chieftain types that had many, many wives, it was terrible because that's not what God's plan was, right? But he was faithful to God, and he had just the one wife of Rebekah. We talked about that, I think last week when the servant went back to their home area and found a wife for Isaac and brought her back, remember? That was a really interesting story too as well. But anyway, Rebekah, though, was barren. And Isaac, unlike his father Abraham, joined with his wife with a scheme to do their angle on trying to fulfill God's promise, right? Just take Hagar. Remember what Sarah said? And we can have children through Hagar because I can't have any children. But God said, no, Ishmael's not going to be the one. You're going to have a baby. And she laughed. Here I am, 90 years old, or 85, whatever it was. I'm going to have no, I don't think so. And God, he took her to task for that, didn't he? Anyway, so now we see Isaac and Rebekah, and they get married. And for 20 years, didn't have any children. And then they had twin boys, Esau and Jacob. But they made a mistake. They showed favoritism. Isaac liked Esau, and Rebekah liked Jacob. And there was that problem there in that family. Anything like that will cause a schism. If you've ever had children before, it can be a devastating thing to see that, because it can hurt a family so badly. And when we had our three boys, I tried everything I could to make sure we were even-handed on them, so they couldn't say, he loves me more than you. Oh, no.
They'll think it anyway.
No, I treated them as even-handed as I could. But sometimes we do that, don't we? We sometimes show favoritism and things like that. Well, anyway, so we see that was a problem, right? It says that Esau was more carefree and therefore kind of careless with his life and the things that really mattered. And we see that by what happened to Esau, right? Jacob, on the other hand, seemed to be a smarter person. He was more astute and more shrewd, and deceptive would be a good word at this point, too. But through Isaac, of course, was the father. Through Isaac and then through Jacob, we see God reaffirming the covenant through them, right? And it was an interesting thing that even though Isaac was a good father, he did kind of follow some of Abraham's poor choices, right? Because he lied about Rebekah, his wife, to his neighbors, just like Abraham lied about his wife Sarah. Yeah. Remember, he said, "Oh, she's just my sister," because he didn't want to get killed because she was a beautiful woman, and apparently that was a problem back in those days. But anyway, God ultimately protected him, and then we see God appearing to Isaac, reaffirming his covenant to Abraham, and continuing to bless Isaac through his offspring. And Isaac and his family were over flawed, but God was faithful nevertheless to fulfill his purposes through him. And now we're going to get into this area of the text, because that's where we want to begin here. So during this particular study today, Jacob, with Rebekah's help, deceived Isaac. Knowing the rest of the story and how Jacob was used by God, we are reminded how God at times uses flawed and even deceitful people to accomplish his own purposes, doesn't he? So let's go ahead and jump into our lesson. The first point we're going to look at is it's called Trap Set, verses 18 to 20. But I'm going to read some of the background here because it's really important to hear some of this background material on Jacob. And verses 1 through 17. I'll go ahead and read those. That's a lot of verses. I get to read sometimes too, right? So in chapter 27, I'm going to read verses 1 through 17, and then we'll jump into the first point of our study today. It says, Now it came about when Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see, that he called his older son Esau and said to him, this is the one that he liked, right? He favored him. It says, My son. And he said to him, Here I am. And Isaac said, Behold, now I am old, and I do not know the day of my death. Now then, please take your gear, your quiver, and your bow, and go out in the field and hunt wild game for me. Apparently, by the way, Isaac liked the taste of venison or wild game, because this is something he really enjoyed, and Esau was a good hunter. And prepare a savory dish for me, such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die. Rebekah, Isaac's wife, was listening at the tent, probably, tent flap, while Isaac spoke to his son Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for the wild game to bring home, Rebekah said to her son Jacob that she favored, Behold, I heard your father speak to your brother Esau, saying, Bring me some of that wild game and prepare a savory dish for me, that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now, a little aside on this. When they do these blessings, it was a permanent thing. You couldn't take it back. It was one of those things, it's a public thing. This is the way it will be. And it was like a contract. It was like, can't be broken. So it's a real important thing in those days to do it and do it the right way. So he's trying to make sure of that. Anyway, so I heard him making these plans with Esau, basically, right? Now, therefore, my son Jacob, listen to me, and I command you, go now into the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats from there, that I may prepare them as a savory dish for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall bring it to your father, that he may eat, so that he may bless you before his death. Now, this sounds kind of interesting, because how could he be fooled so much? How could he be fooled so much? We're going to see how, right? We're going to see how. And Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, Behold, Esau, my brother, is a hairy man, and I don't have any hair on my arms, right? I'm smooth. Perhaps my father will feel me, and then I will be as a deceiver in his sight, and I'll bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing. He's smart. That's probably what will happen, right? But his mother said to him, Your curse will be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go and get them for me. So he went and got those 2 goats, and brought them to his mother. And his mother made a savory food such as his father loved. Then Rebekah took the best garments of Esau, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and she put them on Jacob, her younger son. And she put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. She also gave the savory food and the bread which she had made to her son Jacob. So we see now the trap is being laid, right? And Rebekah wants her favorite one to receive this big blessing. So, but let's see what happens next here on this. Now, for the first part, what I want you to do in these first verses is to notice Jacob's initial steps to trap Isaac. And there was something I was going to read first about that. What was that? Yeah, it's an interesting point here, and we're going to see this a little bit later as we get more into the study. But it talks about this in the book on page 31, Did You Know section. It says, the theme of the unexpected one being the recipient of the blessing runs throughout Scripture. Isaac was chosen instead of Ishmael. Remember, the oldest son was of Abraham? Ishmael, right? But he was not the son of promise. That's what God said. He wasn't the son of promise. Even though he's the firstborn from Abraham, he was not the one. Instead, that went to Isaac. Yeah. Jacob also was chosen by this what we're going to talk about here instead of Esau. Esau was the oldest and Jacob was the youngest. By not much, but he was. David was chosen as the youngest in the family over all his older brothers. Samuel, if you remember, Samuel was chosen over Eli's sons. The young man Samuel was chosen to be the next prophet. What else was there? God chose insignificant Israel. Israel was not much of a nation. but he chose Israel to work out the plan that he wanted done over all these other more powerful nations. From our human standpoint, when we see these powerful, like Egypt and all that stuff, we say, well, that's going to rule for a long time, right? I'm choosing that one. We would probably do that, really. But God knows better than us. He knows the future at all the time. He sees the future, present, and past in one picture. So he knows what will happen, and he knows he wants his people that he's going to choose to be there. Hebrew slaves were chosen, not Egyptian pharaohs. Jesus' birth, that was not announced in the throne room of the king and kings around. It was announced to lowly shepherds. So the principle here is that God uses the unexpected. We shouldn't be surprised when that happens. If you think, well, God can't use me. There was a guy who thought that. He was hiding out from the Midianites, and he was threshing grain in a depression to hide out from the Midianites. Remember? And there's an angel that came to him and says, what? Hey, valiant warrior. Where? Who was that? Gideon, right? Gideon. And he became that valiant warrior. Even though it didn't appear that he would be the right pick, we see that was the pick that God wanted. Anyway, so going back to our lesson now. We read the background verses, and now I think we're actually ready. So who has number one? Yeah, number one. Okay, so for these first three verses, notice Jacob's initial steps to trap Isaac. Go ahead.
He went to his father and said, "My father." "Yes, my son," he answered. "Who is it?" Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." Isaac asked his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God gave me success," he replied.
Well, that's really interesting. So we see what happens. Suddenly, the son shows up, he thinks, right? Here's poor Isaac. He can't see, probably can't hear very well. He's got limited senses, right? But suddenly his son that he'd sent out just a little while ago apparently got some venison right away, or whatever it was he was getting out of the field, right? And cooked it up and brought it to him right away. So he's a little suspicious, isn't he? Yeah. I think I'd be a little suspicious as well, me personally. I don't know. But he says something, he says, "Come close to me." So apparently Jacob was right. Jacob was worried about this, right? Remember he told his mother, well, what if he feels my skin? Mm-hmm. What if he smells me or something like that, right? He'll know that I'm the deceiver. So he came up close to him, it says. He came up close and he says, the voice doesn't sound like my son Esau. It sounds a little bit like Jacob. But remember, he's getting older here. So he's probably thinking maybe my hearing is not as well. But he's suspicious. It says the voice is not him. I did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau, so I blessed him. Oh, I'm jumping ahead. Scott. Sorry about that. I looked down to the other verse. He says, I'm Esau, your firstborn. And so he lied to his father. He lied to his father, right? And he basically is doing exactly what his mother said. But what's interesting is, who did he attach this falsehood to?
I think his mother said that she would take the blame.
Right. That's later. That we saw it earlier. But in verse 20, the last half of verse 20, he blames somebody else. Or not really blames. He uses God.
God, yeah.
Isn't this an interesting thing to see? Is this a familiar refrain in a way? Do you remember in the Garden of Eden?
Yeah.
When Adam was caught with what he did?
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I did it. It's all my fault." No, he didn't. Who did he blame?
First, the woman
the woman that you gave me. Yeah.
He blamed both of them.
And there was another situation similar to that, and I forgot. It's out of my brain now. I can't remember. I don't think it was Cain and Abel. Anyway, but we tend to do that, don't we? When we're caught in deception and traps and stuff like that, we'll blame somebody else, right? So in a way, he's kind of doing that. Says, the Lord caused it to happen quickly. Wow. It's the one thing to deceive a person, perhaps, but then to basically use God as your reason for for the deception. I mean, that's kind of bad, isn't it? What do you think?
You're really going far in that part.
Yeah. Yeah, that. And could God use a person that badly flawed? Well, we know the answer to that question, of course. He does. He does. And we wonder sometimes, how can that happen, right? So we see his initial steps here. Any thoughts on these verses? He lied about who he was. He lied about his position. And he lied about how he got the food so quickly, right? And I think we're going to see, like I said, I jumped ahead a little bit, but the father is a little bit suspicious of this, with good reason. Remember, again, his name means deceiver. Jacob does. So I'd be watching that guy all the time if I was. But he doesn't know that that's Jacob. He thinks it's Esau. There's something else I was going to read about that kind of a thing. Where was it now? Is it coming? I think it might be coming up still. Yeah, I'm going to read that now anyway because it does kind of apply. It talks about, on the Did You Know section on page 34, it says, in the ancient Near East, the firstborn is not automatically the recipient of the paternal blessing. Sometimes we think it will have to be that all the time. It's not necessarily true. It came solely at the discretion of the father, who generally granted the blessing at the end of his life. Once transmitted, however, the blessing could not be revoked or altered. So you can see coming up in these next few verses why Isaac wanted to be really sure. Because he knew once he blessed them, it was irrevocable. There we go, say the word right. Let me see, was there anything else? So Jacob tried to give God credit for helping him. That just astounds me. A couple of questions for us to think about. How do we try to fool others to get a blessing today? Do we do that ever, do you think? Do we sometimes try that? Maybe not as overtly, but maybe as, well, that's not what I want, Lord. I'll try not. That's what I want. Okay, God's leading me that direction. Oh, no, God wanted you to go this way, this way, this way. You said no. You know, we do that, don't we? We sometimes do, right? So, how do you think is it a good thing to do that? First of all, no. That'd be the answer to that one, right? But why do we try to involve God in our schemes that way?
He gives it the okay.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking. We fooled ourselves into thinking that it's okay now to do this particular thing. It's maybe a little shady or maybe a little unethical because God's kind of leading me there. So, and so I can understand the faulty logic, but the logic nevertheless He's trying to employ here, right? We do that sometimes in our own life, don't we? We need to look out for that kind of thing. It's not a good thing to do. Let me see. Let's go on to the next one. Anybody have anything to say about that one? No? Okay. The next step is deception carried out. So we are going to be considering a few things about these people here. And we have Esau and we have Jacob here. So under Jacob, again, what does his name mean? Deceiver.
Isn't that odd that they would choose to name a son Deceiver?
I think it is. I think it is. Now, I can't answer why they would do that, other than maybe that it can also mean schemer. It can also mean somebody who, no matter what, falls on his feet, you know. So it might be an offhand compliment, perhaps. Shrewd person, you know. But we look at the deceiver part in a negative way. And I'm just saying there could be, you know, in other ways, might be they're thinking that it's not such a bad thing.
Do you know what Esau means then?
You know, I did read that, and now for the life of me, I'm not thinking what it is. Somebody with a smartphone, look it up for me real
I thought it was
quick.
red skinned or something like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
it could be something like that, yeah.
I think I have heard that.
So deceiver definitely is under Jacob here, right? And
What
Jacob,
does the name Esau mean?
As a noun, Isa means a member of a Somali people living in Djibouti.
I think you
She never heard
misheard you
it.
there. Well, you know, and that is a good question. Let me see if I covered that here.
It doesn't matter. No.
Yeah, well,
That was
I was trying to remember what it does mean. I think it's a person of the field is what I remember, or something like that.
Because he was a hunter.
It means he that acts or finishes.
Okay, so impulsiveness maybe. a man of action, which would fit, right?
Well,
Because that's-
Once he starts something, he finishes
yeah,
it.
he's probably a single-minded person. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go get that deer and bring it back to dad, whatever it is, right? Something along those lines. That makes sense. Anyway, let's go to the next thing here.
Also translates out as hairy.
Harry, there's what I remember hearing too. Yeah, somebody else mentioned that too. A person who is rough and tumble, very masculine guy. He's got lots of
Hair.
hair. Yeah. So maybe Neanderthalic. No. Well, let's not say that. I don't want to say that. Anyway, for the next 7 verses, this is a big one here. Listen for the next steps of Jacob's deception. Next steps of Jacob's deception. Who has number 2 for us?
I have number
Okay,
2.
you got the big one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether you be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near to Isaac his father, and he felt him and said, His voice is Jacob's voice, but his hands are hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, and his brother's Esau's hands. And so he blessed him. And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, Bring it near to me, that I will eat my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near him, and he did eat, and brought him wine, and he did drink. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelt the smell of his raiment, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is as a smell of the field, which the Lord has blessed.
Okay. Lot going on in these verses, isn't there? So, notice how Isaac did what? He repeatedly questioned him. Why do you think he did that?
Well, he couldn't see well, so he didn't trust his sense. Well, he didn't trust his eyesight, so he wanted
Trust
to-
but verify.
That could be part of it. But remember, he was a little bit confused because it said the voice in verse 22, the last half. The voice seems to be the voice of Jacob, but the hairy arms and they feel like they are Esau's. So he's checking things out carefully, right? He repeatedly questions him. Now I wrote up some terms up here: sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. In our encounters in life, we go through sensories like this, right? We sense things like through our vision, our hearing, touch, taste, smell. So do we see that happening as well here?
Yeah, you know what? It does. It's probably implied without noticing it. But he probably was in the tent, and it's not a lot of light in the tent. It probably had the tent thing closed, because I believe this was a private ceremony, they was going to do while he was eating. So it just didn't make his eyesight, that better to actually see. So I think he yielded to more of what he could feel and hear.
Right.
And
He attempted to look, but I think his eyesight was such that he couldn't discern.
Yeah, he
hardly
couldn't
anything.
discern.
I think you're right about that. But he's using all these senses, right? Each of these senses, you can see how they played out. The hearing, he listened to the voice. Now his hearing was probably dim too as well. Excuse me. But he said the voice kind of sounds like Jacob. So he's checking, making sure. But maybe I'm not listening well because I'm getting close to dying. So he's worried about that aspect of it too. He's got a sense of urgency, doesn't he? So he employs his other senses. What is the other sense he uses? Third one is listed up there as what? Touch, right? Do we do that same thing? Do we like to touch things to see what they are, who they are? Maybe shake hands with somebody you feel they're stronger. Whenever I shake hands with Marvin, he almost crushes my hand. There's certain people are that way, and he's got this great grip, And so I get my eyes closed and shake hands. And when I shook Marvin's hand, I'd say that's Marvin. I would know. And so he's doing the same thing. He's examining carefully to see. What about taste? Do we have taste up here?
Yeah.
well, the food.
The food, yeah. It says he brought it to him, and he ate. It says, And he also brought him some wine, and he drank. Maybe the wine would help, dull his senses so Jacob could get away with this deception perhaps as well. But he liked that savory food. And so the savory food is something, it connects him with his son Esau, doesn't it? And we do that same thing. There's certain foods that when I eat them, I remember things. Like when I eat seafood, I remember being with my grandma. Because my grandma lived at Hood Canal on the beach. And we would go fishing, and we'd catch fish, and we get oysters right off the beach. We dig clams. It was really a great experience. So whenever I have those things, I close my eyes for a moment, just about, and I could see, and I could smell, I could hear that beach experience. So those things have connection to us. So he's having that same connection here when he eats this food that's just got a savory taste that he's used to having when Esau would bring him something from the field. Although I will admit, venison has a little bit different taste than probably goat.
It does.
But it's young goat, so I don't know. Go ahead.
But his wife flavored it like.
Maybe
spiced
that's
it.
true.
Yeah.
Maybe she did, yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
She said
She was in on this whole thing, by the way, don't forget that.
Yep, maybe he was used to Jacob deceiving him because,
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
he had to question everything.
Something had probably happened in the past. We don't know all the details of that life. We just know the main things. So that very possibly he knows his sons. He knows that Esau is a straight-minded person who lives in the field and stuff. He knows that Jacob doesn't. He lives in a tent and he's kind of scheming a lot. So that could be a factor into this whole thing. Yeah, no doubt. What about we talked about sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell. Do we see that sense being incorporated too?
Yeah, they took his brother's clothes.
Rebecca did a really good job.
She did. Now, you have to admit,
She
Rebecca
clever.
was good.
She was clever.
Oh, she was clever. Yeah, she used the goat
Jacob learned from
skin.
someone.
Yes, Jacob learned from somebody. That's a good point. But she got that clothes that Esau wears a lot when he goes out in the field, and it's got that earthy smell.
Mama loved me better.
He pulls his son close and, yeah, that smells like Jacob. Yeah, it feels like Jacob. This food tastes like what Jacob makes. I'm not sure about the voice a little bit, but, I can't quite see clearly. So he's using all these senses. We do the same thing, don't we? So, a question asked is, when is it healthy to remain skeptical, though, about a person's claim? Is it healthy to remain skeptical about some of the claims we hear people say?
Well, we're supposed to check things out according to Scripture.
Yeah, we are.
We're not supposed to just take it for face value.
Mhm.
We challenge it and see if the Spirit is of God. And when I was reading a few days ago, I think it's in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11,
Mhm.
and it says that Satan has ministers of righteousness.
Yeah, they tend to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
we have to really be careful and challenge it and make sure that this is the real deal.
Verse number 3, who has that one for?
I have 3.
Oh, right. Verse number 3 gives us some insight here and a little background on this. Jesus is sending out his disciples, I think 2 by 2, to the house of Israel, okay? And they're supposed to go out and share with people what they know about Messiah already, apparently, right? And so they're supposed to do this. And this verse is written in light of what they were doing or what they'd done. So go ahead and read that verse for us.
Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves.
Wow. So we need to be discerning. Well, it says be as shrewd as
Serpents?
serpents. It doesn't mean you're evil. That's not what the intent was. The intent was the serpent is careful. The serpent is calculating, right? The serpent does discern things. But still, be as innocent as doves. Don't do it from a heart that's evil, but do it from a heart that is open to God. So when Jesus said this, he said, look out, because basically there's people out there that are out to harm and not to do good. And so when you go out there, be discerning, be careful, right? You get that from that verse as well?
In measure, yeah, large measure. We'll talk about that some in the sermon today, actually. Go figure.
I'm stealing some thunder?
A
No.
little bit.
Okay.
We're complimenting thunder. It's echoing in the chambers.
But basically, is it good to be skeptical sometimes about people's claims? Yeah. Be really careful. We talked a little bit about some of the end time prophecies earlier today, And we have to always look at those things in light of what Jesus said, and not be scared of things, because sometimes people try to scare other people or mislead them, right? And Jesus also warned about false messiahs. Remember that?
Right.
Because when you hear somebody say, "Well, he's over here in the wilderness," don't believe them. They're trying they're trying to confuse you. They're trying to lead you astray. And there's been a lot of those kind of situations in the past. So we need to be discerning. We need to be smart. Sometimes there's this attitude of well, believe everybody who says, and believe the best in them all the time. Well, I understand that. But at the same time, you don't want to be taken in and be deceived. We don't want to be people of God that are like throwing away the things God's given us to be good stewards of. When you're a good steward, you're taking care of something. And so you want to do that. Anyway, so sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. We should use those things when we are examining these kind of things, right? We talked about this already, the did you know feature, so I'm going to skip past that part already. So, ask the question, what are the key ideas about the blessing Isaac was getting ready to bestow on Jacob? Well, we're going to talk about that in the next thing, so I think this is leading up to that there. The trap was basically set, and deception was carried out. All that was left now was for Isaac to share the blessing with his son, he thought Esau, but instead it's going to be Jacob. So let's look at that last point here. We talked about the trap set, deception carried out. He's been fooled. He thinks it really is Esau. And now blessing granted. Let's look at that part here. It says, in the last 3 verses, I want you to listen to the elements or parts of this blessing that Isaac gave. Who has number 4 for us?
I've got it.
You got it?
Now may God give you the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and an abundance of grain and new wine. May peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. Now it came about as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had hardly gone out from the presence of Isaac, his father, that Esau, his brother, came in from hunting.
Okay. I did want to touch about blessing really quick, because the last part of the previous verse said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which the Lord has blessed." And he proceeds then to give a blessing to that son, right? So there's a little thing that talks about that, about the word blessed. And it's in our handout. I think it's on page 1 of the handout. No, it's on page 2. Excuse me. Where is page 2 of my handout? No, it's not.
It's on
I blew it.
three.
It's on handout number 3. You're right. Handout number 3. When will I learn not to trust myself? Handout number 3. If you look at your handouts, the one that says handout number 3. Keyword blessed. Keyword blessed. It's next to the last handout. So I'll just go ahead and read this here. It says, we previously encountered the Hebrew word translated blessed in Genesis 24:27, where Abraham's servant blessed or praised the Lord. Remember that? When he found the wife that Isaac was to have, Rebekah, right? He stopped immediately and he blessed the Lord. That was neat. And for leading him to the right house. The term occurs in different contexts here in chapter 27. Here it designates the irrevocable blessing that a father typically conferred on the eldest son before the father's death. In the Old Testament context, to bless means to endow with power for success, including prosperity and longevity. This verbal blessing was normally futuristic. In other words, this is what's going to happen to you when you follow the Lord. You will be blessed further along these lines, you know. Additionally, the Old Testament views God as the only source of blessing. It is only in His name that others can confer blessing. So when Isaac did this to his son, he was doing it on that power of what God had given him from his father before that too. And so this was this patriarchal blessing from God. It says from Genesis 12:1-3 forward, the Lord demonstrated that He alone ultimately has the power to bestow this blessing. In the accounts of the patriarchs, blessing is linked specifically to the reproductive powers. Thus, we see that God alone gives life. He is the one who will cause the people to have their offspring like He promised. It would be like the sands of the seashore, remember that? Or the stars in the sky. The basic understanding of God as the life giver extends throughout Scriptures to its ultimate expression in John 3:16 3:16, which we know that verse, of course. Isaac's blessing on Jacob included prosperity, international respect, and the authority over Isaac's descendants. So there's a lot going on in this blessing. We sometimes overlook that, how important it was. It was vitally important, wasn't it? So, on these verses here, we just got through reading, right? What do we see here? What's part of this blessing? What are some elements we see?
Fertility, or the water.
Okay, it says the dew of heaven. That's an interesting term, right? What do you think that means? Let's try to find this here somewhere. And it says the great difference in day and night temperatures in a typical Palestine resulted in heavy dews in the morning hours. Such dews were beneficial because they kept vegetation alive during the summer drought. Recognizing it as a gift from God, he might withhold the dew from his disobedient people. We see that in 1 Kings 17 and Haggai chapter 1. So during the time of the Israelites' wilderness wandering, the Lord sent manna along with the dew, if you remember right, during that time frame in Exodus. And it talks about numbers as well. In a figurative sense, the king's favor, godly teaching, and the blessing of unity among God's people are compared to that refreshing dew. It was a simile. It was something that used, like this does for this, so will I do for you, your life, is what it's saying there. Now what about the fatness of the earth? That sounds almost, in our day and age, no, I don't want that, right?
Well, rich, wouldn't that be a good way of...
Yeah, I think so. The earth's riches in general, I think is what it's referring to here. The fatness of the earth, and as in my Bible commentary notes, it talks about that as well. It's symbolic, and it conveys the idea of prosperity and well-being, living off the fat of the land. You've heard that term before. That means you're not that you're getting big, but you're enjoying the life from what God's given us in our life, right? Go ahead.
I was going to say it's abused now in today's.
Oh yeah, it's different meaning a little bit now, right?
You know, people abuse it, name it and claim it. These churches that just say, just believe and you'll have it, and jump up and down, 3 times and run around the church.
Some strange things, yes. Apparently, by the way, and I didn't know this, but a related noun is generally designated olive oil.
What?
Olive oil. It's a related noun to this term that they're using that refers to the fatness of the earth. And olive oil played a significant role. We know, definitely, didn't it? They mixed it with flour for their bread. The oil was used in cosmetics and skin, treating the skin, softening, things like that. It was also used in perfumes. It was also used in medicines to help you recover from things and ailments. And it was also used for lighting of lamps. So we see it's related. That is something that's integral. It's an important part of their lives, isn't it? I didn't know that. It was amazing to me. Priests and kings were anointed with oil. It was a symbol of the Lord's blessing. So thus the term becomes synonymous with prosperity as well. So we see that related noun, it comes from that root, apparently, of the fatness of earth given to us. And if you remember, the Garden of Eden was a great place, wasn't it? That was God's ideal for us, right? Everything they wanted was right there. They had the perfect environment for them. They had all they wanted right there. And of course, we know what happened there. Sin cursed that whole area. What was another element here of the blessing?
The nations will bow down to you.
Okay. Before that, it says an abundance of grain and new wine. It's kind of related to what we already talked about too, right? And grain sometimes comes across as corn or wheat or cereal. It's just a designated this as a desirable and valuable crop, basically, right? But then, like you said, nations and people, right? What does that mean? They will serve you. Peoples will serve you. Nations will bow down to you. They'll be masters of your brothers. Be masters of your brothers, excuse me. And may your mother's son bow down to you. So this is all going to Jacob. This is the part where when Esau found out about it, he wept because he realized this. He is now going to be a subordinate to his younger brother, younger by whatever minutes it was before he was born, because they were twins. But still, nevertheless, that was going to happen, right? And people, it says that this aspect of a blessing is a relationship type thing, okay? It involves even things like religious fellowships, family ties, a king-subject relationship, the unity of a group. All these things are encompassed in this general blessing that he was talking about here. And so, was this a desirable thing as well? Of course it was, right? Definitely was. People would love to have that upon them as a blessing, right? Now, and it says, your mother's son bow down to you. So it's basically saying the other son will be your servant. Now that was probably something that Jacob really wanted right there. Because he'd been, the second born, second fiddle in dad's eyes, and in the family unit. But now he has jumped up a notch, up to there. And I think that was probably what was driving him to follow Rebekah's guidance on this as well. Because he now was in the position of power of the family. Because this was an important thing. What the family did when the family patriarch died, when Isaac died, who would be in charge of that whole complex, that whole thing? And it's not just a real simple thing where there's just like, 3 people. No, we're talking about a huge thing. And so he would like to be that person in charge. So I think that's probably, in my opinion, that's probably the main thing that drove him to agree with this. What do you think about that? Can you see what the attractiveness of that would be?
Yeah.
They've gone their whole lives thinking that Esau would be in here.
Yeah.
And I could imagine brothers teasing or, being,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Anyway, so then we see what? He gives them this blessing, and then he says in verse 26, come over here, come close and kiss me, my son. So he came close and he kissed him. Now that sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? No, it's very deceptive, very deceptive. I can only think of one situation in the Bible that is worse. Can anybody think of that one?
Judas.
The Judas kiss. Yes. If you remember, that was, and I think I have that in my handout.
There's another similar one with Joab,
yes.
with David's military leader.
Yes.
Oh,
He
yeah.
invites the leader of the rebellion over. Oh, come give me a hug because we're reconciled, and he stabs him in the back.
Stabs in the back. Yeah. Backstabber. That's right.
Yeah.
In Matthew 26, we see some interesting verses here you're probably very familiar with. I'm going to briefly go over them. Then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me to betray him to you? And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver for him. And from then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus. So, what was Judas's motivation? Money. Now, some people will say, well, he was just doing this to get Jesus to reveal himself and show his power. But he said, what will you give me?
Yeah.
Not, I'm going to give him to you. No, it's just because I know I want to. So I'm thinking he's very mercenary here. Very mercenary. And if you remember right, he held the purse.
It was a treasure.
And he used to pilfer from it, steal from it. So we know that already. Then later on in that same chapter, Matthew 26, verses 48 to 49, now Judas Iscariot, who was betraying him, gave them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Immediately, right away, Judas went to Jesus and said, hail, Rabbi, and kissed him. So we see duplicity here also. But that's very similar to this. When I read this, I said, boy, that sure's got a familiar sound to it, doesn't it? So be careful. Watch out for deception amongst some people, right? Definitely. And when somebody's trying to say that they're on your side, check carefully. Okay, so what happened after that? He gets I forgot about the curses. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. So not only will you get this blessing, but you have God's what? Protection, right? God will protect you in this verse. It talks about that too, doesn't he? No, I'm jumping to the last one. Did we do the last one yet? No, let's do the last one now. Boy, I'm getting ahead of myself so much. I just love this story. Who's got the last one? Number 4.
I already read it.
Oh, that's what I thought. Good.
I'll do it again.
No. I thought I had. Anyway, so he talks about the curses. I was on track. Yeah. The curses.
Behind.
So God's not only blessing him, but he's also protecting him. protected him from those others, right? And then, so he's all done. Jacob leaves the presence of his father,
Just in the nick of time.
and right in comes, on cue, comes Esau. And we see that if you read, and we don't have much time because we're almost out of time, but at the end here, let's see, stolen blessing. Okay, we talked about that. It talks about, what about me? What about me? And he wept because he realized he'd missed out on the best. And I think earlier he'd also sold his birthright too, part of his birthright. So it was one of those things where he's now basically without anything, and he takes a vow to exact vengeance. And we see that Jacob has to flee for his life. Rebecca says, "Go back to my relatives, up to where Nahor is from, and hide out there for a while your brother is mad. And then after a while, I'll send for you," or something like that. So we see that's what happened in the whole situation with the blessing being granted and the cursing. There was what? Because of deception, there was what? Consequences. Consequences, wasn't there? Yeah. So it says, note the consequences on deceit of the family. The family was split apart, right? One brother was against the other one, wanted to kill him. Even as God's purposes are fulfilled, because that was God's purpose, by the way, was for Jacob to take on that mantle. It was negative consequences because of what he did. Jacob's future as the leader of the family was now assured, though, through the blessing of Isaac. He would carry out the promises provided through God's covenant with Abraham, even though the actions and the character were flawed. So how does that comfort us? Because we know that even though we are involved sometimes in these kind of things, God can and will still use us, despite our brokenness and our imperfections. Because I am a broken person. We all are, right? But God uses us, even with that. It says that even while we are yet sinners, Christ died for us. So that's a powerful thing to remember. 3 main points we conclude. There we go, say the right word. Believers, Christians, must avoid justifying wrong actions. We should not justify. Well, it's the only way I can get my blessing is to fool my dad. So yeah, I'll do it, Mom. Right? That's what he said. You shouldn't do that. God would have provided the right thing to happen anyway. Second point, that we as Christians must be diligent when examining truth claims. Look carefully. Use a little bit of, was it salt? What's that term? I can't remember. But anyway, basically, be aware when you hear these claims to check them out thoroughly first. Don't be taken in by false claims. And the last point, believers can trust God to bring his purposes to pass in every situation, even when we think, well, it can't happen. Like Abraham thought he could not have a son of promise. And he supplied him with Isaac. Right? And we see that happening throughout our world, don't we? So the challenge from our study is to consider ways that we can live out each of these statements we just talked about, 3 different statements. Avoiding wrong actions, examining truth claims, and following God's will, right, in every situation we can. So, is discernment important? Yes, it is. It's important. Our key verse is Luke 21:8. I know I had it here. Oh, here it is. Key verse, Luke 21:8 says, and Jesus said to the disciples, "See to it that you are not misled, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is near. Don't go after them." And we talked about that earlier today, didn't we?
Yeah.
Interesting how God uses those things. And I didn't realize at the time that it was like fitting right in what we're going to be talking about at the end here. That's pretty cool. Any questions or comments? This is an interesting story, isn't it?
Yeah, very good lesson.
Let's have a word of prayer will be dismissed because they rang the bell on me already. I'm late again. I apologize.
You did good though.
Oh, okay. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for how you care for us and how you watch out for us, Lord. Help us to not be deceptive, Lord, to be truthful. At the same time, help us be skeptical of certain things that come up in our lives, Lord. Not mainly to be of a mindset of always being negative, but as a mindset of doing what's right for you and not following after something that's not true. Lord, I just pray that you'd give us that discernment through your Holy Spirit, Lord. Thank you. Be with us as we go throughout our week, Lord, and be with us as we go to worship following this. And just pray for our pastor as he brings us this message. In your son's precious name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for being here again. I'm sorry. We're late. Thank you for being here online. Hope you enjoyed it as well. And again, this is Grace Baptist Church. My name is Norm Ellis. Glad to have you with us online as well as here in the class. Hope you have a great week. God bless you all.
Thank you. I have another question.
Oh, just let me watch this. I gotta get this up real quick. Just a second.
Big brother real quick.